The Haunting of King Frostmare Chapter 1. The darkened submission, the dim glow of the computer screen illuminated King Frostmare's face as he scrolled through the countless emails and video submissions. As the renowned king of creepy, he had built a vast digital empire that attracted thousands of paranormal enthusiasts. Every day, he received hundreds of videos, each claiming to capture the unknown. But tonight, one submission stood out from the rest. The subject of the email read, "Darkened Soul, a glimpse beyond the veil." Intrigued, Frostmare clicked on the link. The video started playing, revealing a dimly lit room. The only source of light was a flickering candle, casting eerie shadows on the walls. As the camera panned, it settled on a skeletal figure draped in a tattered hospital gown. Its sunken eyes stared directly into the camera, and in a voice that sent chills down Frostmare's spine, it whispered, "My soul has been darkened, and so has yours now too." The video abruptly ended, leaving Frostmare in stunned silence. He replayed the video, trying to find any signs of editing or manipulation, but it seemed genuine. The room felt colder, and an oppressive weight hung in the air. Frostmare's cat, Luna, who usually lay curled up beside him, began to hiss and arch her back, her gaze fixed on something behind him. Turning around, Frostmare saw nothing out of the ordinary, but the temperature in the room had dropped significantly. He could see his breath, and the windows had fogged up. Luna continued to growl, her eyes darting around the room as if tracking an invisible presence. Feeling a sudden rush of unease, Frostmare decided to shut down his computer and take a break. He tried to convince himself that it was just the late hour and the eerie content of the video playing tricks on his mind. But as he stood up, he felt a cold hand grip his shoulder. Whipping around, he found himself face to face with nothing but empty space. Luna, now visibly agitated, began to meow loudly, her gaze still fixed on something unseen. Frostmare scooped her up, trying to calm her, but she wriggled out of his grasp and darted out of the room. Deciding to follow her, Frostmare cautiously made his way through his apartment. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak of the floorboards sounded amplified. Luna had taken refuge under the dining table, her eyes wide with fear. Frostmare knelt beside her, whispering soothing words. But as he reached out to pet her, he felt another icy grip on his wrist. Pulling back in shock, he saw a faint outline of a hand, which quickly vanished. Heart racing, Frostmare grabbed Luna and made his way to the front door. But as he reached for the doorknob, it began to turn on its own. The door swung open, revealing the darkened hallway outside. A gust of cold wind blew in, extinguishing the lights in the apartment. Plunged into darkness, Frostmare fumbled for his phone, using its flashlight to navigate. But as he shone the light around, he caught glimpses of shadowy figures moving just beyond its reach. Realizing he was not alone, Frostmare made a dash for the exit, Luna clutched tightly in his arms. But as he reached the stairwell, he heard a voice echoing from the darkness behind him. "My soul has been darkened, and so has yours now too." With adrenaline pumping, Frostmare raced down the stairs, not daring to look back. Bursting out into the street, he took a moment to catch his breath, the cold night air filling his lungs. He looked up at his apartment window, half expecting to see a face staring back at him. But there was nothing. The oppressive feeling had lifted, and the world seemed to return to normal. Still shaken, Frostmare decided to spend the night at a nearby hotel. He needed time to process what had just happened and figure out his next move. But one thing was clear. The video titled "Darkened Soul" was more than just a creepy submission. It was a doorway to something much darker and more sinister. And Frostmare had unwittingly opened it. Chapter 2. Disturbed nights. The soft hum of the hotel's air conditioning was the only sound that permeated the room. King Frostmare lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of the evening replaying in his mind. Luna, usually a ball of energy, lay curled up beside him, her eyes darting around the room warily. Exhaustion finally took over, and Frostmare drifted into a restless sleep. Almost immediately, he found himself back in the dimly lit room from the video. The skeletal figure stood before him, its sunken eyes piercing into his very soul. It reached out, its bony fingers cold and clammy, and whispered, "You have seen, and now you cannot unsee." Frostmare tried to move, to scream, but he was paralyzed. The room grew colder, and the shadows seemed to come alive, swirling around him, whispering dark secrets. Just as the skeletal figure was about to touch him, Frostmare jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The room was dark, the only light coming from the streetlights outside. Luna was nowhere to be seen. Frostmare called out to her, but there was no response. He got up, searching the room, and found her hiding in the bathroom, her eyes wide with fear. Trying to shake off the remnants of the nightmare, Frostmare decided to check his emails. Maybe immersing himself in work would distract him from the eerie events of the night. But as he opened his laptop, he noticed something odd. Several objects in the room had been moved. His camera, which he had left on the desk, was now on the floor. His backpack was open, its contents strewn around. Confused, Frostmare began to pick up his belongings when he heard a faint whisper. It seemed to come from the corner of the room, but when he shone his phone's flashlight, there was nothing there. The whispering continued, growing louder, a cacophony of voices all speaking at once. Panicking, Frostmare grabbed Luna and his belongings and made his way to the hotel lobby. He needed to get out, to find a safe place. But as he reached the front desk, the receptionist looked up, her face pale. "Sir, we've been receiving several complaints from other guests. They say they've been hearing whispers and seeing shadowy figures in their rooms. Some even claim to have seen the same skeletal figure from your video." Frostmare's heart sank. The video. He had uploaded it to his channel earlier that day, thinking it was just another creepy submission. But now, it seemed to have unleashed something far more sinister. His phone buzzed with notifications. Opening it, he saw hundreds of messages from his followers, all reporting similar experiences after watching the Darkened Soul video. Some spoke of nightmares, others of objects moving on their own, and a few even claimed to have seen the skeletal figure in their homes. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Frostmare decided to take action. He needed to find a way to stop the entity and protect his followers. But first, he needed to find a safe place for himself and Luna. He remembered an old friend, a fellow paranormal enthusiast, who lived on the outskirts of the city. Frostmare quickly dialed his number, explaining the situation. His friend, always up for a paranormal adventure, agreed to let him stay. As Frostmare made his way to his friend's house, he couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves seemed to hide a lurking presence. Luna, too, seemed on edge, refusing to leave Frostmare's side. Upon reaching his friend's house, Frostmare was greeted with a warm hug. "It's been too long," his friend said, ushering him inside. The house was cozy, filled with trinkets and artifacts from various paranormal investigations. Frostmare explained everything, from the video submission to the events at the hotel. His friend listened intently, his face growing graver with each revelation. "We need to find a way to stop this entity," Frostmare said, determination in his voice. "I can't let my followers suffer because of my mistake." His friend nodded in agreement. "We'll figure this out. But first, you need to rest. It's been a long night." Frostmare agreed, and the two settled down in the living room, Luna curled up between them. But sleep was elusive. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind sent Frostmare's heart racing. The night dragged on, and as dawn broke, Frostmare knew he had a long day ahead. He needed to find a way to stop the entity, to protect his followers, and to reclaim his life from the haunting grip of the darkened soul. Chapter 3. Seeking help, the morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room. But for King Frostmare, the brightness outside did little to dispel the darkness that had taken hold of his life. Over a hastily prepared breakfast, he and his friend discussed their next steps. "We need to get to the bottom of this," Frostmare declared, determination evident in his voice. "I've dealt with the paranormal before, but nothing like this." His friend nodded in agreement. "You need to consult with experts, people who've dealt with entities like this before." And so, Frostmare began his quest for answers. He reached out to renowned paranormal investigators, ghost hunters, and even scholars who had studied ancient rituals and curses. Each expert brought their own tools and techniques, from infrared cameras to EVP recorders, hoping to capture evidence of the entity. But despite their best efforts, the investigations yielded no concrete results. Some reported feeling a cold presence, while others heard faint whispers, but there was nothing tangible to show for it. The entity, it seemed, was elusive. Frostmare's frustration grew with each passing day. He felt like he was fighting an invisible enemy, one that was always one step ahead. And to make matters worse, his followers continued to report disturbances, with some even claiming to have been attacked by the entity. One evening, as Frostmare was going through the comments on his channel, a particular message caught his eye. It was from an anonymous user, and it read, "Beware the consequences of meddling with the unknown. The darkened soul seeks vengeance, and you have opened the door." Chills ran down Frostmare's spine. The message was clear, he was being warned. But by whom? And why? As he pondered over the message, another notification popped up. It was from Dr. Helena Carter, a renowned paranormal expert known for her groundbreaking research on ancient curses. Frostmare had reached out to her earlier, hoping she could shed some light on the situation. The message read, "I've come across entities like the one you described in my research. They are ancient spirits, bound by curses and seeking release. Your video may have inadvertently given it the power it needed. I suggest you seek out Coralie, a psychic medium known for her ability to communicate with such entities. She may be your best hope." Frostmare had heard of Coralie. Her reputation was legendary in paranormal circles. But he had also heard rumors, stories of rituals gone wrong, of clients left traumatized. He was hesitant, but desperation was beginning to set in. After discussing it with his friend, Frostmare decided to take the plunge. He reached out to Coralie, explaining the situation and asking for her help. To his surprise, she responded almost immediately. "I've been expecting your call," she wrote. "The entity you speak of is powerful, but not invincible. I can help, but it won't be easy. Are you prepared to face the darkness?" Frostmare hesitated for a moment. The weight of responsibility bore down on him. But he knew he couldn't back down now. His followers were counting on him, and he had to find a way to put an end to the haunting. Taking a deep breath, he replied, "I'm ready." Little did he know, his journey into the unknown had only just begun. Chapter 4. Coralie's arrival. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the city when a knock echoed through Frostmare's temporary refuge. Opening the door, he was met with the piercing gaze of Coralie. Dressed in flowing robes with intricate patterns, her presence was both calming and intimidating. Without a word, she stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. "The energy here is thick," she murmured, her fingers twitching as if feeling the very air. "You've brought something powerful into your life, King Frostmare." Frostmare nodded, leading her to the living room. "I've dealt with the paranormal for years, but this is different." Coralie took a moment, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. "This entity is ancient, bound by chains of anger and vengeance. It's not just seeking a way out, it's seeking retribution." Frostmare felt a chill run down his spine. Retribution? For what? Coralie opened her eyes, fixing him with a serious gaze. "That's what we need to find out. But first, we need to protect this space." She began to rummage through her bag, pulling out various artifacts, crystals, candles, and ancient scrolls. As she set to work, arranging the items in a specific pattern, Frostmare's thoughts raced back to the video. "Coralie," he began, "the video that started all this. I managed to trace its origin. It was sent from an old, abandoned hospital on the outskirts of the city." Coralie paused, her eyes narrowing. "That's no coincidence. Such places often harbor restless spirits. The pain, the suffering, it leaves a mark. We need to investigate." After setting up a protective barrier around the house, the two set out, armed with tools of the trade, EMF detectors, infrared cameras, and Coralie's bag of mystical artifacts. The drive to the hospital was filled with tension, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. The hospital stood like a forgotten relic, its walls covered in ivy, windows shattered. The once bustling corridors now echoed with silence, save for the occasional drip of water. But as they stepped inside, Coralie's demeanor changed. She looked uneasy, her eyes darting around. "This place is a beacon for the supernatural," she whispered. "But there's something else, something darker." They began their investigation, with Frostmare documenting everything. Room after room, they searched for clues, trying to piece together the hospital's history. In a dilapidated office, they found old patient records, and one name stood out: Elijah Turner. Admitted for severe psychosis, the notes mentioned his obsession with the occult and rituals. As they delved deeper, they stumbled upon a hidden basement. The air grew colder, and a sense of dread filled the space. In the center of the room stood an altar, surrounded by symbols etched into the ground. Coralie's face turned pale. "This is it," she murmured. "The source of the entity's power. Elijah must have performed a ritual here, binding the entity to this place." Frostmare, realization dawning, spoke up, "And the video. It must have been a way to free it, to give it a new host." Coralie nodded. "We need to sever that connection, to bind it back to this place." The two set to work, with Coralie guiding Frostmare through the ritual. As they chanted, the room seemed to come alive, shadows dancing on the walls, whispers echoing through the air. But with each word, the entity's power waned, its hold on the world weakening. Hours passed, and as the first rays of dawn broke, the ritual was complete. The hospital, once a place of darkness, now stood silent, the entity bound once more. Exhausted but relieved, Frostmare and Coralie made their way back. The weight that had pressed down on Frostmare for so long was lifted. But as they drove away, a thought nagged at him. The video had been a deliberate act, a way to free the entity. Who had sent it? And why? Coralie, sensing his thoughts, spoke up. This may be over, but the journey has just begun. There are forces at play here, King Frostmare, forces that neither of us understand. But together, we'll face them. And as the city skyline came into view, Frostmare knew that with allies like Coralie by his side, they could face any darkness that lay ahead. Chapter 5. The hospital's secrets. The city was just beginning to stir as King Frostmare and Coralie returned to the abandoned hospital. The early morning sun cast a golden hue over the dilapidated structure, but the eerie silence that enveloped the place was a stark reminder of the darkness that lay within. As they made their way through the crumbling corridors, Frostmare couldn't help but wonder about the hospital's past. There must be records, something that can give us a clue about what happened here, he mused. Coralie nodded in agreement. Every place has a story, and this hospital is no different. We just need to find it. Their search led them to the hospital's old archives, a room filled with dusty shelves and forgotten files. As they began to sift through the records, one name repeatedly caught their attention: Nathaniel Gray. Nathaniel, a patient admitted in the late 1940s, was said to possess unique psychic abilities. The records spoke of his uncanny ability to predict events, some mundane and others tragic. From minor accidents within the hospital to major incidents in the city, Nathaniel's predictions were eerily accurate. But as they delved deeper, the tales took a darker turn. Whispers among the staff suggested that Nathaniel was being used in secret experiments, conducted under the guise of treatment. The hospital's administration, intrigued by his abilities, saw him as a valuable asset, one that could be exploited for their gain. Coralie, her face grave, spoke up. This isn't just about an entity seeking release. Nathaniel's spirit is trapped here, bound by the torment he faced. He's seeking revenge, not just for himself, but for all the souls that suffered here. As they continued their search, Frostmare stumbled upon an old, leather-bound diary hidden beneath a pile of papers. The diary, worn and weathered, bore the initials N.G. Opening it, they were met with pages filled with neat handwriting. The diary detailed Nathaniel's life within the hospital, from his initial days of confusion and fear to his growing realization of the experiments he was subjected to. Entries spoke of painful procedures, of being treated like a lab rat, and of the loneliness and despair that consumed him. One entry, dated just a few days before his mysterious disappearance, read, "They think they can control it, harness it. But they don't understand. The visions, the voices, they're not just predictions. They're warnings. And soon, they'll realize the price of their ambition." Coralie, her eyes filled with tears, whispered, "We need to help him, King Frostmare. We need to set his spirit free." Frostmare nodded, determination setting in. "We will. We'll put an end to this, once and for all." The diary, a testament to Nathaniel's suffering, was the key. It held the answers to the hospital's dark secrets and was the path to freeing the trapped souls within. As they left the archives, the weight of their discovery pressing down on them, Frostmare and Coralie knew that their journey was far from over. The hospital's secrets had been unveiled, but the battle to set things right had only just begun. Chapter 6. The ritual. The evening sky was painted with hues of deep purples and reds as Coralie and Frostmare began preparations for the ritual. The abandoned hospital's main hall, with its high ceilings and large windows, seemed like the most fitting place. The echoes of countless souls that had once roamed these halls felt palpable. Coralie spread a large white cloth on the floor, placing candles at each corner. In the center, she placed an old silver bowl filled with a mixture of herbs and oils. "This ritual is ancient," she began, her voice soft yet firm. "It will allow us to communicate with Nathaniel's spirit, but we must be cautious. Spirits, especially those bound by pain and anger, can be unpredictable." Frostmare nodded, his usual bravado replaced by a somber seriousness. "I understand. Let's do this." With everything in place, Coralie began to chant. The words, though foreign to Frostmare, resonated within him, sending shivers down his spine. As the chant grew louder, the candles flickered, and a cold wind swept through the hall. Suddenly, the room was plunged into darkness, save for the dim glow of the candles. A shadowy figure began to materialize in the center of the cloth. It was Nathaniel, his form translucent, his eyes filled with pain and rage. "Why have you summoned me?" His voice, though ethereal, echoed with a deep anguish. Coralie stepped forward, her posture calm and assertive. "Nathaniel Gray, we seek to help you. We wish to free you from the chains that bind you to this place." Nathaniel's gaze shifted to Frostmare, his eyes narrowing. He hissed. "You released the video, amplifying my pain, turning my torment into entertainment." Frostmare swallowed hard, guilt evident in his eyes. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I never meant to cause harm." Nathaniel's form wavered, his anger palpable. "I want freedom, but I also want revenge. Revenge on those who used me, who turned me into a spectacle." Coralie, sensing the rising tension, intervened. "Nathaniel, we understand your pain, your desire for vengeance. But revenge will only bind you further. Let us help you find peace, to move on from this realm of suffering." For a moment, Nathaniel seemed to consider her words. Then, with a sigh, he spoke. "I will agree, but on one condition. The video, the source of my renewed pain, must be destroyed." Frostmare hesitated. The "Darkened Soul" video had become one of the most viewed pieces of content on his channel. It had brought him fame, recognition, and a significant boost in revenue. Deleting it would be a significant loss. Seeing his hesitation, Coralie whispered, "Frostmare, think about what's at stake here. This isn't just about views or money. It's about doing what's right." Nathaniel's gaze bore into Frostmare, waiting for an answer. Taking a deep breath, Frostmare finally nodded. "All right," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "I'll delete the video." A look of relief washed over Nathaniel's face. "Thank you," he whispered, his form beginning to fade. Coralie, her energy drained from the ritual, sank to the floor. "We did it," she murmured, a small smile playing on her lips. Frostmare, though relieved, couldn't shake off the weight of his decision. He had sacrificed a significant part of his success for the greater good. But as he looked around the now silent hospital, he realized that some things were more important than fame or fortune. Together, Coralie and Frostmare left the hospital, the weight of their actions pressing down on them. But they also left with a sense of accomplishment, knowing they had done their part in righting a grave wrong. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but in the end, they had emerged victorious. Chapter 7. The entity's wrath. The stillness of the night was disrupted by a sudden gust of wind, rattling the windows of Frostmare's studio. He sat at his desk, reviewing content for his channel, when his computer screen began to flicker. Dismissing it as a minor glitch, he restarted the system. But when it booted up, he was met with a sight that sent chills down his spine. Videos from his channel, years of painstaking work, began disappearing one by one. Titles faded, thumbnails vanished, and views dropped to zero. Panic set in as Frostmare tried to salvage what he could, but it was as if an unseen force was erasing his digital empire. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the studio. Turning around, Frostmare saw his equipment scattered across the floor, lights shattered, and cameras destroyed. The room grew cold, and an oppressive weight settled in the air. From the shadows, a familiar voice whispered, "You promised." Realization dawned on Frostmare. In his hesitation to delete the "Darkened Soul" video, he had angered the spirit. And now, it was seeking revenge. Rushing to his phone, he dialed Coralie, hoping she could offer some guidance. But as the call connected, all he could hear was a faint, raspy breathing. "Coralie?" He called out, anxiety evident in his voice. There was a pause, and then a scream pierced the line, followed by a thud. The call disconnected. Fear gripping him, Frostmare raced to Coralie's residence. The door was ajar, and as he stepped inside, he found the place in disarray. Books and artifacts lay scattered, candles overturned, and in the center of the room lay Coralie, her eyes rolled back, her body rigid. Frostmare rushed to her side, trying to wake her, but she remained unresponsive. It was as if she was trapped in a trance, her spirit held captive by the entity. Desperation set in. Frostmare knew he had to act fast. Grabbing his laptop, he pulled up the "Darkened Soul" video. With a heavy heart, he clicked on the delete button, watching as the video, the source of all the chaos, vanished. The room's atmosphere shifted immediately. The oppressive weight lifted, and a sense of calm settled in. Coralie's eyes fluttered open, confusion evident in her gaze. "Frostmare?" she whispered, her voice weak. "What happened?" Relief washed over him as he helped her sit up. "The entity," he began, it was angry. "I hesitated to delete the video, and it lashed out." Coralie nodded, her memories slowly returning. "It's not just about the video," she murmured. "The entity, Nathaniel, he's bound to this realm by more than just the video. His remains, they're still here, and they're what's keeping him trapped." Frostmare's eyes widened in realization. "We need to find them, lay him to rest." Coralie nodded in agreement. "In my trance, I saw a vision. An old cemetery, on the outskirts of the city. A lone grave, marked by a twisted tree. That's where we'll find him." Determination set in as the two set out, armed with shovels and a resolve to put an end to the haunting. The journey to the cemetery was filled with tension, the weight of their task pressing down on them. As they reached the cemetery, the twisted tree from Coralie's vision stood out, its gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Beneath it lay a simple grave, marked with the name, Nathaniel Gray. With reverence, they began to dig, the soft moonlight guiding their way. Hours passed, and as dawn began to break, they uncovered a simple wooden coffin. Inside lay the skeletal remains of Nathaniel, a silver locket clutched in his bony fingers. Opening the locket, they found a faded photograph of a young woman, her eyes filled with love and sadness. Tears filled Coralie's eyes as she whispered a prayer, asking for Nathaniel's spirit to find peace. They reburied the coffin, placing the locket on top as a tribute. As they left the cemetery, the first rays of the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the land. The entity's wrath had been quelled, and Nathaniel's spirit was finally at peace. But for Frostmare and Coralie, the journey was far from over. The world was filled with restless spirits, and they had a duty to help them find their way. Together, they would face the unknown, armed with courage, determination, and a bond that could never be broken. Chapter 8. The search. The abandoned hospital stood tall and foreboding against the backdrop of the setting sun. Its once pristine walls were now covered in grime and decay, and its windows, shattered and broken, gave it an eerie, haunted look. King Frostmare and Coralie stood at its entrance, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. "We need to find Nathaniel's remains," Frostmare said, determination evident in his voice. "It's the only way to truly free his spirit." Coralie nodded, her psychic senses already attuned to the energy within the hospital. "He's here," she whispered. "I can feel his presence. But it's not going to be easy. He's set traps to keep us away." With a deep breath, the duo entered the hospital. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was deafening. Every step they took echoed through the empty corridors, and the shadows seemed to move and shift with a life of their own. As they delved deeper into the hospital, Coralie's psychic abilities began to guide them. She could sense the residual energy left behind by Nathaniel, and it acted as a beacon, leading them through the maze-like structure of the hospital. But the journey was not without its challenges. Doors slammed shut behind them, trapping them in rooms filled with chilling cold. Floors gave way beneath their feet, forcing them to find alternate routes. And at every turn, they could feel Nathaniel's spirit watching them, his anger and pain palpable. After what felt like hours, Coralie suddenly stopped, her hand resting on a seemingly ordinary wall. "There's something behind here," she murmured, her fingers tracing an intricate pattern on the wall. With a soft click, a hidden door swung open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading downwards. The duo descended, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom of the staircase lay a hidden chamber, its walls lined with old medical equipment and faded photographs. In the center of the room stood a simple stone sarcophagus, its lid adorned with the image of a young man, Nathaniel. Coralie approached the sarcophagus, her hands trembling slightly. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where Nathaniel's remains lie." With Frostmare's help, they carefully lifted the lid, revealing the skeletal remains of Nathaniel. Around his neck hung a silver locket, its chain tangled and twisted. Opening the locket, they found a faded photograph of a young woman, her eyes filled with love and sadness. Tears filled Coralie's eyes as she whispered a prayer, asking for Nathaniel's spirit to find peace. She then began to perform a ritual, her voice rising and falling in a melodic chant. The air in the chamber began to shimmer and shift, and a soft, ethereal light enveloped the sarcophagus. As the ritual reached its climax, a gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the candles and plunging the room into darkness. When the light returned, the sarcophagus was empty, and the oppressive weight that had filled the hospital was gone. Coralie, her energy drained from the ritual, sank to the floor, a look of relief on her face. "It's done," she murmured. "Nathaniel's spirit is finally free." Frostmare nodded, a sense of peace settling over him. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "We freed Nathaniel and put an end to the haunting." The duo made their way out of the hospital, the weight of their mission lifted from their shoulders. The sun had set, and the night was filled with stars, their soft glow casting a gentle light over the land. As they left the hospital grounds, Frostmare turned to Coralie, gratitude evident in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "Without you, I don't think we could have done it." Coralie smiled, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Well, It's not every day you get to free a trapped spirit and explore a haunted hospital, she replied with a wink. The two shared a laugh, their bond strengthened by the challenges they had faced. Together, they had faced the unknown and emerged victorious, and they knew that no matter what the future held, they would always have each other's backs. Chapter 9. The final battle. The sun had barely risen when King Frostmare's phone buzzed with a barrage of notifications. Bleary-eyed, he picked it up, only to be met with a flood of messages from his followers. What's happening to your channel? Videos are glitching. There's a strange figure appearing in all the videos. Alarmed, Frostmare quickly accessed his channel. To his horror, videos were being distorted, views plummeting, and in the background of each video, the faint outline of Nathaniel's spectral form could be seen, his eyes filled with rage. It's the entity, Frostmare whispered, realization dawning. He's trying to destroy my digital empire. Without a moment's hesitation, he called Coralie. We have a problem, he began, explaining the situation. Coralie's voice was filled with urgency. We need to act fast. The entity, now free from its physical confines, is more powerful than ever. We need to trap it before it causes more damage. The duo met at Frostmare's studio, the epicenter of the digital chaos. Coralie, her bag filled with artifacts and talismans, began setting up a protective circle around the main computer. We'll use the power of these artifacts to create a digital prison, she explained. But it won't be easy. The entity will fight back. As she spoke, the lights in the studio began to flicker, and a cold wind swept through the room. The computer screen lit up, displaying the haunting image of Nathaniel's spirit, his eyes filled with anger and pain. Coralie began to chant, her voice rising and falling in a rhythmic cadence. Frostmare, following her lead, placed the artifacts around the computer, each one glowing with a soft, ethereal light. The room began to shake, and the entity's form grew larger on the screen, its voice echoing with a deep, guttural growl. You cannot trap me, it hissed. I will not be confined again. But Coralie and Frostmare were undeterred. With a final, powerful chant, they activated the digital prison, a bright light enveloping the computer. For a moment, it seemed as if they had succeeded. The room grew still, and the computer screen returned to normal. But then, with a deafening roar, the entity broke free, its form materializing in the room, its eyes fixed on Coralie. With a swift movement, it lunged at her, knocking her to the ground. Frostmare rushed to her side, but the entity was relentless, its power overwhelming. Coralie, her strength waning, whispered a final incantation, a protective barrier forming around them. But it was clear she was at her limit, her energy drained from the battle. Frostmare, desperation evident in his eyes, turned to the entity. Nathaniel, he began, his voice filled with emotion. I know you're angry, hurt. But destroying my channel, hurting us, it won't bring you peace. The entity paused, its form wavering. You don't understand, it whispered. All I wanted was to be heard, to have my story told. Frostmare nodded, understanding dawning. Then let me help you, he said. I promise, I'll share your story with the world. Your pain, your torment, it won't be in vain. The entity, its form now more human than spectral, looked at Frostmare, tears forming in its eyes. You promise? It asked, its voice filled with hope. Frostmare nodded. I promise. With a final, grateful nod, the entity began to fade, its form dissipating into the ether. The room grew still, the weight of the battle lifted. Coralie, her strength returning, sat up, a small smile on her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We saved the channel." Frostmare nodded, gratitude evident in his eyes. "And we gave Nathaniel the peace he so desperately sought." The duo, their bond strengthened by the challenges they had faced, left the studio, the first rays of the sun casting a warm glow over the city. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious, and they knew that no matter what the future held, they would always have each other's backs. Chapter 10. A new beginning. The aftermath of the battle with Nathaniel's spirit left King Frostmare's studio in disarray. The once organized space was now littered with artifacts, overturned furniture, and remnants of the protective circle Coralie had drawn. But amidst the chaos, there was an overwhelming sense of peace. The oppressive energy that had once permeated the room was gone, replaced by a calm stillness. Frostmare turned to Coralie, who was slowly regaining her strength. "It's over," he whispered, relief evident in his voice. Coralie nodded, a weak smile playing on her lips. "Yes," she replied. "Nathaniel's spirit has finally found peace." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Frostmare worked tirelessly to restore his digital empire, repairing the damage done by the entity and ensuring that his followers were kept in the loop. News of the battle with Nathaniel's spirit spread like wildfire, and Frostmare's channel saw an influx of new subscribers, all eager to learn more about the ordeal. Coralie, on the other hand, found herself at a crossroads. The battle with Nathaniel had taken a toll on her, both physically and emotionally. She had initially planned to leave the city once the ordeal was over, but the events of the past few days had changed her perspective. "I've decided to stay," she announced one evening as she and Frostmare sat in his studio, discussing the future. "There are so many people out there who need help, who are facing supernatural threats just like we did. I want to be there for them." Frostmare nodded in understanding. "I think that's a great idea," he replied. "You have a gift, Coralie. And the city needs someone like you." And so, Coralie opened a consultancy, offering her services to those facing paranormal threats. Word quickly spread, and soon, she was inundated with requests for help. From haunted homes to possessed objects, Coralie tackled each case with determination and skill, ensuring that no one had to face the unknown alone. Frostmare, inspired by their ordeal, decided to create a documentary about the entire experience. From the mysterious video submission to the final battle with Nathaniel's spirit, he chronicled every detail, ensuring that Nathaniel's story was told. The documentary was an instant hit, garnering millions of views and solidifying Frostmare's status as the king of creepy. But despite their individual successes, Frostmare and Coralie knew that they were stronger together. They formed a partnership, vowing to protect the digital realm from paranormal threats. With Coralie's psychic abilities and Frostmare's digital expertise, they were a force to be reckoned with. The duo tackled cases that others deemed impossible, their reputation growing with each success. From haunted websites to cursed algorithms, they faced each challenge head-on, ensuring that the digital realm remained safe from supernatural threats. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Frostmare and Coralie's partnership flourished. They became a beacon of hope for those facing the unknown, their names synonymous with bravery and determination. And as they sat in Frostmare's studio one evening, reviewing footage from their latest case, they couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. "We did it," Frostmare whispered, a smile playing on his lips. Coralie nodded, her eyes filled with pride. "Yes," she replied. "We did." And as the screen faded to black, the two shared a moment of quiet contentment, knowing that they had faced the unknown and emerged victorious. They had found a new beginning, a fresh start, and they were ready to face whatever challenges the future held. Chapter 11. The forgotten tape. The sun's rays filtered through the blinds, casting a warm glow over King Frostmare's studio. It had been a year since the ordeal with Nathaniel's spirit, and life had returned to a semblance of normalcy. Frostmare's digital empire continued to thrive, and his partnership with Coralie had only strengthened over time. As he sipped his morning coffee, there was a knock on the door. Puzzled, Frostmare opened it to find a nondescript package on his doorstep. No return address, no note, just a plain brown box tied with twine. Curiosity piqued, he brought the package inside and carefully opened it. Nestled within the bubble wrap was an old VHS tape, its label yellowed with age. In faded ink, it read, "The Beginning." Frostmare's heart raced. The tape's appearance was unexpected, and its title ominous. With a sense of foreboding, he inserted the tape into an old VCR he kept for such occasions. The screen flickered to life, revealing grainy footage of a dimly lit room. The unmistakable setting of the old hospital where Nathaniel had once resided became evident. Doctors in dated attire moved about, their faces obscured by surgical masks. In the center of the room, strapped to a gurney, was a figure that Frostmare recognized all too well, Nathaniel. The footage showed the patient undergoing a series of experiments. Electrodes were attached to his temples, machines beeped and whirred, and throughout it all, Nathaniel's eyes, filled with pain and fear, stared directly into the camera. As the experiments progressed, the footage became more disturbing. Nathaniel's psychic abilities were being tested and exploited, his predictions recorded and analyzed. The doctors seemed to be pushing him to his limits, and with each test, Nathaniel's condition deteriorated. The tape continued, showing scenes of Nathaniel being isolated, deprived of human contact, and subjected to further experimentation. The cruelty was palpable, and Frostmare felt a knot of anger and sadness form in his stomach. But it was the tape's conclusion that sent chills down his spine. The footage shifted to a close-up of Nathaniel's face, his eyes sunken and hollow. In a voice barely above a whisper, he uttered a chilling message. "You may have won the battle, but the war has just begun." The screen went black, and the tape ejected with a soft click. Frostmare sat in stunned silence, the weight of the tape's revelations pressing down on him. He realized that Nathaniel's spirit was just the tip of the iceberg. The experiments had not only exploited Nathaniel's abilities but had also trapped other spirits in the digital realm. And now, they were waiting to be freed. Frostmare picked up the phone and dialed Coralie's number. "We have a problem," he began, his voice filled with urgency. Coralie listened intently as Frostmare recounted the tape's contents. "We need to act fast," she replied. "If there are more spirits trapped in the digital realm, we need to free them before it's too late." The duo sprang into action, their mission clear. They would delve deeper into the hospital's history, uncover the truth behind the experiments, and free the trapped spirits. As they embarked on their new journey, they knew that the challenges ahead would be immense. But with determination and courage, they were ready to face whatever the digital realm had in store for them. And as the sun set, casting a warm glow over the city, Frostmare and Coralie set out on their new adventure, vowing to right the wrongs of the past and bring peace to the spirits trapped in the digital realm. If you have enjoyed our paranormal scary story about the renowned and honorable King Frostmare, king of the scary and creepy, please visit us at Paranormal Untold Stories. .com to listen to more of our scary stories collection. Paranormal, Untold Stories encourages you to contact us if you have your own untold story that you would like our professionals team to put online as a scary story. Thank you. Please follow our YouTube channel, Paranormal, Untold Stories, and encourage others to do the same. Paranormal, Untold Stories.